My name is Rowan Mitchell, and 3 weeks before my 31st birthday, my family invited me to what they called a legacy dinner. That's what the text said. Legacy dinner. It came from my older brother, Caleb, who never texted me unless it was a group message about holidays or funerals. Mom and Dad want everyone there. It's important. Important. I read that word at least 10 times. For the last 5 years, I'd been the quiet disappointment of the Mitchell family. The daughter who left the family construction business. The one who moved to Chicago instead of staying in our small Ohio town. The one who chose investigative journalism over something respectable. The one who wrote an article last year exposing wage theft in a regional contracting company. A company that just happened to be one of Dad's biggest partners. After that, Sunday dinners stopped. Invitations dried up. Calls went unanswered. So when they said legacy dinner, I thought maybe, just maybe, it meant reconciliation. Maybe they were ready to admit I'd built something on my own, that I wasn't a phase they could outwait. The dinner was at the Grand Elm, the same banquet hall where my parents celebrated their 25th anniversary. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, polished wood floors that echoed when you walked. When I stepped inside, I froze. It wasn't just my parents and siblings. It was everyone. Aunts from Michigan, cousins from Kentucky, business associates, church elders. Even the mayor was there, standing by the bar with a glass of bourbon like this was a fundraiser. At least 80 people. And all of them went quiet when I walked in. The silence didn't feel warm. It felt staged. My mother approached me first. She kissed the air near my cheek but didn't quite touch me. "You made it," she said, like I'd arrived to a court hearing. My father stood near the head table, hands folded behind his back, watching. I scanned the room for Caleb. He gave me a tight nod but wouldn't hold my gaze. That's when I noticed the banner behind the podium. Mitchell Family Legacy, honoring our name. Not welcome home, Rowan. Not happy birthday. Legacy. The word pressed against my ribs. I should have left right then, but I didn't, because part of me still wanted to believe this was about healing. I took the seat they'd placed for me front and center. A single chair slightly separated from the long family table, like I was both guest of honor and exhibit A. The lights dimmed. A spotlight flicked on above the podium, and my father stepped forward, tapping the microphone twice. The sound echoed through the hall. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Tonight, we address something that's been weighing on our family." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a celebration. This was a verdict. And I was about to learn exactly what they thought my legacy really was. The pen hovered between us like a loaded weapon. "Sign it," my father said, his voice no longer polished, just tight. I didn't take it. Instead, I looked past him, straight at Caleb. He shifted in his chair. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You're removing me from the legacy?" I asked, loud enough for the mic to catch it. Dad's jaw flexed. "This isn't a debate." "No," I said calmly. "It's damage control." A ripple moved through the tables. I stepped toward the podium before he could block me. The spotlight followed like it had been waiting for me all along. "You're not afraid I embarrassed you," I continued. "You're afraid the investigation isn't finished." Gasps. The contractor near the back went pale. Dad tried to interrupt, but I reached for the remote on the podium first. The screen flickered, then changed. Not to his slides, to mine. Because while he was busy planning this public disowning, I'd been planning something too. A timeline appeared. Audit confirmations, employee testimonies, financial discrepancies flagged over 6 years. And at the bottom, a formal inquiry filed with the Department of Labor. 2 days ago. Whispers turned sharp. My father's face drained of color. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut in. "When people are robbed of wages, when payroll records don't match deposits, when bonuses disappear." I let that hang. Then I turned slightly. "And for the record, I didn't file the newest complaint." Every head turned, slowly, toward Caleb. He swallowed, and in that silence, I saw something crack in him. "I did," he said quietly, but the microphone picked it up. The room exploded, voices rising, chairs scraping. My mother standing so abruptly her napkin fell to the floor. Dad stared at his son like he'd been betrayed by gravity itself. Caleb stood, shoulders shaking but steady. "You told me it was bookkeeping errors," he said. I checked. It wasn't. This wasn't a legacy dinner anymore. It was an unraveling. And the paper in Dad's hand? suddenly looked very, very small. The room no longer felt like a banquet hall. It felt like a courtroom where the jury had just realized the evidence was real. My father didn't shout. That would have been easier. Instead, he went still, the kind of stillness that comes before something breaks. "You don't understand what you've done," he said to Caleb, voice low and shaking. "I do," Caleb replied. "For once, I do." Mom stepped between them like she could physically block the truth. "This is a misunderstanding. Rowan twists things for a living." There it was. The old script. Blame me. Discredit me. Shrink me. But something had shifted in the air. People weren't looking at me like I was the scandal anymore. They were looking at Dad, at the contractor in the back who was now texting frantically, at the mayor who'd quietly set his drink down. I stepped forward again. Not aggressive, just steady. "This dinner wasn't about protecting the family name," I said. "It was about isolating me before this went public. You wanted to paint me as unstable, disloyal, reckless." Dad's eyes flashed. "You are reckless." "No," I said softly. "I'm honest." The word echoed harder than any accusation. I looked around the room at cousins who'd borrowed money from the company, at church members who praised integrity every Sunday. "Ask yourself something," I continued. "If this was truly about embarrassment, why invite business partners? Why invite city officials?" Silence answered for them. "Because this wasn't discipline. It was strategy." Dad straightened his jacket, trying to regain control. "The company has lawyers, auditors. You think you can just—" "I don't think anything," Caleb interrupted. "I verified it." And that was the moment the power shifted completely. Because it wasn't just the rebellious daughter anymore. It was the son who was supposed to inherit everything. Dad turned to him slowly. "After everything I built for you?" Caleb's voice cracked. "You built it on people's paychecks." That landed like a gunshot. Mom sank into her chair. Someone near the back whispered, "Is this true?" The contractor left. Actually left, slipping out the side door without a word. And suddenly, the spectacle they planned for me was swallowing them whole. Dad looked back at me, eyes sharp and wounded. "You think this makes you righteous?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "It just makes me free." The document in his hand trembled slightly now. The disowning papers. The performance contract. And for the first time all night, he looked like a man who realized he'd miscalculated. Because legacies don't collapse from outside attacks. They collapse from the truth. And tonight? The truth had a microphone. The chandelier lights felt harsher now, exposing everything instead of flattering it. My father slowly placed the unsigned document back into his folder. Not because he'd changed his mind, but because the room had changed sides. "You're both being manipulated," he said finally, gesturing between Caleb and me. "You don't understand how business works." Caleb let out a hollow laugh. "I understand payroll, Dad. I understand numbers that don't add up." A low murmur spread again, this time sharper, less sympathetic. The mayor cleared his throat near the bar. "Mitchell, if there's an investigation pending, I need to know whether municipal contracts are affected." There it was. Not family, not loyalty, liability. Dad ignored him. He stared at me like I'd orchestrated the entire collapse. "You've always wanted to prove you were better than us," he said. "No," I replied. "I wanted you to be better than this." That hit harder than yelling ever could. Mom stood abruptly. "This dinner is over." But no one moved. Because endings only work when everyone agrees. Caleb stepped forward, closer to me now than he'd stood in years. "I didn't tell her," he said to the room. "She didn't know I filed. I did it because I couldn't sleep anymore." His voice wasn't defiant. It was exhausted. And that exhaustion carried weight. An aunt near the front table wiped her eyes. One of the church elders leaned back slowly, expression unreadable. Dad's control was slipping in visible layers. "You think the Department of Labor is going to thank you?" he snapped. "You think they care about your conscience?" "No," Caleb answered quietly. "But I do." Silence again. Heavy. Final. I stepped away from the podium. I didn't need it anymore. This wasn't revenge, I said, scanning the room one last time. It was accountability. I looked directly at my father. "You tried to erase me tonight, to frame me as the reckless one before this broke publicly." His lips pressed thin. "And maybe you thought if everyone watched you disown me," I continued, "they'd believe I was the problem." I paused. "But you forgot something." I let the words settle before finishing. "Reputations built on fear don't survive sunlight. The mayor quietly walked toward the exit. Two business partners followed. Mom looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. And my father, for the first time in my life, he had nothing rehearsed left to say. No script, no audience control, no applause, just consequences. Caleb exhaled beside me, and as the room slowly fractured into hushed conversations and uneasy departures, I realized something powerful. They hadn't just tried to disown me tonight. They'd tried to bury the truth, but instead of a funeral for my name, they'd staged the beginning of an investigation. And this time, I wasn't walking out alone. People didn't clap. They didn't shout. They just started leaving, one table at a time, quietly, carefully, like if they moved too fast, the whole building might collapse with the Mitchell name carved into it. I grabbed my coat from the back of my chair. My hands were steady now. Too steady. Caleb stood beside me, staring at Dad like he was waiting for something, an apology maybe, or an explosion. He got neither. Dad adjusted his cufflinks, the smallest act of denial. If you walk out with her, he said to Caleb, voice low but cutting, don't expect to walk back in. Caleb didn't hesitate. I'm not. That was the cleanest break of the night. Mom's eyes filled, but she said nothing, because silence had always been her specialty. As we headed toward the exit, I heard whispers behind us. Is it true? I heard federal investigators were already reviewing contracts. This could be serious. It was serious. And for once, I wasn't the scandal. Outside, the cold Ohio air hit like clarity. The river across the street reflected the banquet hall lights in broken streaks. Caleb let out a long breath. I didn't plan for it to come out like that. I know, I said. He stepped out onto the sidewalk, coat unbuttoned, face flushed. You think this makes you heroes? He demanded. No audience now. No microphone. Just us. You've destroyed everything I built. I met his gaze evenly. If it can be destroyed by the truth, it wasn't solid to begin with. He looked at Caleb like he didn't recognize him. You'll regret this. Maybe, Caleb said, but I'd regret staying quiet more. A car pulled up at the curb, one of the business partners leaving early. He avoided eye contact as he drove off. Dad noticed, and that's when it truly sank in. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about survival. You think the company goes down, he said coldly, and you walk away untouched? I held his stare. I haven't taken a cent from you in years. His jaw tightened, because that was the part he hated most. He couldn't control me financially, couldn't threaten to cut me off. He'd already done it. A notification buzzed on my phone. I glanced down. An email preview from my editor. Heard there was a scene tonight. Call me. We may need to update the story. News travels fast in small towns. Dad saw the screen light up, and for the first time all evening, he looked afraid. Not angry, not outraged, afraid, because the narrative he tried to stage had just slipped beyond his control. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket. This isn't revenge, I told him quietly. It's accountability. He didn't respond. He just stood there under the streetlight, watching his version of legacy crack in real time. Caleb stepped closer to me. Ready? He asked. I nodded, and as we walked away from the Grand Elm, I didn't feel disowned. I felt unburdened. Behind us, the banquet hall lights flickered slightly in the wind. Inside, they tried to write my ending. But outside, the story was just beginning. By morning, the town had chosen sides. Small towns don't need press conferences. They run on whispers, screenshots, and forwarded emails. When I woke up in my Chicago apartment, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, unknown numbers, texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, and one message pinned at the top from my editor. We're running it, full feature, with updates. I called him back. You're sure? I asked. Rowan, he said. The Department of Labor confirmed an open inquiry at 8:12 this morning. Someone tipped off a regional reporter last night. And your last article? It's trending again. I glanced at the ceiling, letting that sink in. What about legal? I asked. We've triple-checked everything. If they sue, Discovery will bury them. Discovery. The word echoed like a ticking clock. When I hung up, there was another notification. Caleb, Dad called an emergency board meeting. Some investors are pulling out. I sat up straighter. This was moving faster than I expected. An hour later, the first headline hit. Mitchell Construction under federal review following wage theft allegations. No mention of the dinner. No mention of me. Just facts. And that made it worse for them, because facts don't feel dramatic. They feel solid. By noon, local radio stations were discussing ethical concerns, social media threads, dissected company filings. Former employees began commenting publicly. One wrote, "I thought I was the only one." Another, "They told us bonuses were delayed. Guess we know why." The floodgates had opened. Around p.m., my phone rang again. "Mom." I stared at it for a long time before answering. Her voice was tight, controlled. "You've made your point." "I didn't set out to make one," I said calmly. "You could have handled this privately, like last year," I replied. "When you asked me to retract." Silence. "You've humiliated your father." I let that sit. "He humiliated himself," I said quietly. She exhaled sharply. "You think this doesn't affect you? Your last name is still Mitchell." I almost laughed. "That's the part you don't get," I said. "My credibility doesn't come from him." She didn't respond, because she knew it was true. Before hanging up, she said something softer. "Families don't survive this kind of fracture." I stared out the window at the city skyline. "Families built on silence don't survive truth," I answered. The line went dead. That evening, Caleb sent another update. 2 board members resigned. One requested an independent audit. And Dad? He'd hired a crisis management firm, which meant one thing. He wasn't preparing for reconciliation. He was preparing for war. I set my phone down slowly. They tried to disown me in front of 80 witnesses. Now the whole state was watching. And this time, there would be no banquet hall, no spotlight, no scripted speeches, just evidence. And evidence doesn't care about legacy. 3 days later, the subpoenas arrived. Not at my apartment, at Mitchell Construction headquarters. Caleb sent me a photo of the envelope sitting on Dad's desk. Official, seal stamped in blue, impossible to ignore. Federal Wage and Hour Division. The crisis management firm issued a statement within hours. Mitchell Construction denies all allegations and welcomes transparency. Transparency. The irony was almost poetic. By then, former employees weren't whispering anymore. They were emailing me directly. Screenshots of pay stubs, text messages from supervisors, copies of contracts with suspicious deductions circled in red. One message hit harder than the rest. "I misran twice because I thought I'd miscalculated my hours. Turns out I didn't." I stared at that line for a long time. This wasn't abstract anymore. It was groceries, medicine, gas money. And suddenly the dinner felt even uglier. They hadn't just tried to silence me. They'd tried to preempt consequences. That evening Caleb called. "I moved out," he said without preamble. I closed my eyes briefly. "Are you okay?" "Yeah." A pause. "Dad changed the locks." "Of course he did." "Where are you staying?" "With a friend for now. I'm meeting with investigators tomorrow." I leaned back in my chair, heart heavy but steady. "You don't have to do this alone." "I know," he said. "I just wish it hadn't taken me this long." Growth rarely comes on schedule. The next morning, another headline dropped. Multiple employees joined federal inquiry into Mitchell Construction. This one named the company directly in connection with alleged systematic underpayment. Dad called once. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You've made your statement. Call off your dogs." My dogs. As if federal investigators worked on my leash. As if truth obeyed commands. By afternoon, 2 longtime contractors publicly distanced themselves from the company. The mayor issued a neutral comment about monitoring developments. Neutral. Translation: waiting to see who survives. Late that night, I got a message I didn't expect. From Aunt Denise. "I'm sorry for how that dinner happened. I didn't know the full story. I should have asked." I read it twice, then replied simply, "Thank you." Because this wasn't about collecting apologies. It was about exposure. And exposure was spreading. Caleb texted again before midnight. "They're reviewing 6 years of payroll records." 6 years. Long enough to dismantle a reputation. Long enough to prove a pattern. I stood by my apartment window, watching traffic blur below. They'd called it a legacy dinner, a ceremony to preserve a name. Instead, it became the night the narrative slipped beyond their control. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for punishment. I was watching accountability unfold in real time. No spotlight, no script, just consequences catching up. And the Mitchell name? It wasn't being erased. It was being examined. By the 3rd week, the Mitchell family empire was unraveling in real time. Every call, every email, Every whispered conversation now had an edge of fear. Employees who once feared Dad's wrath were speaking openly. Bankers refused to extend lines of credit. Investors were requesting emergency audits. And the federal investigators? They weren't moving fast, they were moving smart, calculated, thorough, and inevitable. I watched it all unfold from my apartment in Chicago, and for the first time, the entire weight of 31 years of tension felt gone. I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I didn't need a microphone. I didn't need approval. I only needed distance and clarity. Caleb called that evening. His voice sounded tired but free. It's hitting him harder than we imagined. The board is forcing him to step aside while they investigate. Mom's scared. He doesn't know what to do. I smiled softly. Good, good. He laughed. A little bitter, a little relieved. You mean, freeing us? Exactly, I said. You can't control someone's life by fear. You can only try. And sometimes the people you want to punish the most are the ones who refuse to bend. Later that night, I walked along the riverwalk near my apartment. The lights shimmered off the water, quiet, still, safe. For the first time, birthdays and family expectations didn't feel like chains. They felt irrelevant. The media coverage continued for months. Dad tried to spin narratives, paint me as disloyal and vindictive, but nobody believed it. Not employees, not investigators, not anyone who had watched the facts unfold. The truth has a stubborn persistence one. You can't silence with a speech or a staged dinner. I didn't attend another family gathering after that. I didn't block everyone, because some relationships like Caleb's were worth preserving. But I did reclaim myself, my life, my choices, my voice. And it was sweeter than any forced reconciliation or hollow apology could ever have been. The final lesson? Families can disown you. Crowds can judge you. Names can try to erase you. But when you stand in your truth, fully and unflinchingly, the world shifts. The power belongs to the one who refuses to be silenced. I wasn't disowned anymore, I was freed. And for the first time, my birthday felt like it truly belonged to me.